Something that I often get asked is how do I create such detailed images? A lot of my work is about detail, texture, contrast and vibrancy, and that is a big part of what I do. And yes, it is an aesthetic, but also there's a technical element to this. There's a technicality in order to achieve that. So I want to tell you the steps I go through in order to create these super hyper real detailed images. Now, unfortunately, a lot of this comes down to equipment, and I'm not going to shy away from that. A lot of it is you need to throw money at the problem, and this is rare that this is the case, but in this instance it is. But there are a few things you can do to help yourself, so let's go through those first. Now, the first one won't cost you anything, and this is often actually the most overlooked one. Here is an apple. Here is an orange. The apple is perfectly smooth, or at least this one is. The orange has loads and loads of dimples which create texture. And the way they do that is when light hits it, they create shadows. If you try and photograph something really smooth and create detail out of it, it's not going to work. If you photograph something which already has lots of texture, it is much easier to create a very detailed image. Sounds obvious, that is often the biggest downfall of most people trying to recreate this style. Doesn't mean you can't have smooth things in the shot. We often have a smooth plate with textured food, but there has to be the texture in there. Probably going to have this orange later. I'm addicted to oranges. Now the next thing comes down to cameras, and this sucks. You need a good camera. You need a high resolution camera to be able to record the detail. And more than that, you need a lens which can resolve enough detail for the sensor. So I've got a 5DSR, which is, as far as I'm concerned, bang for buck, the best camera you can buy. It's not the best camera you can buy, but in terms of like cost efficiency it is. Although maybe the 5D Mark II is better because it's so cheap. Anyway, one of those two. I've then got a Mamiya Sekor 6x7 lens. So this projects a 6x7 centimeter image onto a 35mm sensor, which is like, it is monstrous. We're getting only the very center of that lens projecting onto the sensor. And because of that, we're getting an incredibly sharp image because there's none of that soft fall off going on around the edges. We then use the tilt shift function on here in order to use the optimal aperture. So the best aperture for the lens where it resolves the most detail, but whilst also getting the most of the image in focus. Because if it's not in focus, you're not getting detail. So a tilt shift lens or a Cambo field camera like this is really useful for that sort of thing. So we'll just pull that back a bit, there we go. And that allows us just to get that really detailed image. Now the final and most important and often overlooked element to this is the light source. Now when it comes to lighting, we have a few types of light, but let's super oversimplify it to this. Hard, soft, diffused, specular. I currently have a softbox over here that's bigger than me. It is large and diffused, which means it's a soft diffused light. Over there, I have one which is coming straight from a reflector, hitting me here, which is hard because it's small, and it's specular because the inside is like a tinfoil hat. Let me show you. This here is my go-to type of hard light modifier. When the light is hard, you get really crisp shadows, and because of that, it pulls out detail. And obviously you can go too far and end up with just black and white, and that's too much contrast, and that doesn't work. It's a fine line. But also, you see this nice metallic inside to this one here, and this is like the standard Broncolor reflector. I can never remember what they're called. But this here gives it specularity, which is the opposite to that diffusion material down the front of a softbox. The specularity really helps with the detail. It's like the clarity slider in the real world. Adding this here is like adding clarity in real life. It's not, but that's the visual illusion it gives you. So that helps. So in short, we need good camera, high resolution, 20 megapixels or more, good lens that's got high resolving power. Ideally, some sort of movements within the camera so we can play with the optimal aperture, a detailed subject, and a nice crispy light source. That is it. That is all there is to it. There's no witchcraft or magic sort of things going on. It's a very simple formula to get a detailed image. Now, of course, you can go too detailed, and fellow gentlemen, we do that all the time. We go a little bit too far, we go a bit too hard with the light, a bit too specular, a bit too detailed with the subject, and then we bang it in post and we find the clarity and structure sliders and we get a little bit carried away. So just because you can add more detail doesn't mean it looks better. So I think it's worth noting that more is not always best. It's a subtlety, it's a fine line, especially if, like me, you work predominantly in still life and food work, finding that optimal point for those images to capture the detail in a hyper-realistic way is really what I'm aiming for. It might not be what you're aiming for, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong here, but hopefully with these bits of information, you can find your little niche within there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do hit like and subscribe, it really helps the channel. And if you have any other questions about this sort of work, drop them in the comments below, and I'll try and make a video for everyone. I'll see you soon, bye-bye.